Cellular transport. Learn the role that the cell membrane plays when transporting material in and out of the cell. All right, switching gears a little bit, let's go to active transport. Usually things like molecular pumps. When a cell uses energy to pump molecules across the membrane, it's pumping it against a concentration gradient. And that's usually through that protein channel. But this particular protein channel, like we've seen before, is going to use energy. It's not just passively letting guys in and out of there. It's going to use energy to pump it in the opposite direction that it normally would. So this allows the cell to keep its concentration that it likes. It's not always favorable for a cell to move its water in and out, so sometimes it likes to keep a certain concentration of certain ions. Usually potassium is one of the big ones, and then of course chlorine and sodium are some others. But it wants to keep a certain amount of potassium inside of its self and not lose it because it needs potassium. So this allows the cell to concentrate key molecules within the cell, but it also allows it to remove waste quickly from the cell when it needs to as well. So we're going to have these pumps, and these pumps are protein channels, just as seen before. But because this is active transport, it's low concentration on the outside and high concentration on the inside, and it's going to move it in the opposite direction it normally would using energy. So over time, we see that we keep a concentration inside of the cell that's higher, and that's because the cell likes some of those things like potassium. Not only does the cell use those protein channels, but it will also use vesicles to move things in and out of the cell. If things are going in the cell, we call that endocytosis. That's usually moving pretty large particles into the cell. If things are leaving the cell, they're doing exocytosis. They're exiting. And that's moving any materials, large or small, out of the cell. A good example of endocytosis is when white blood cells, our immune system cells, when they engulf bacteria in order to fight infection, they move these large particles, bacteria for example, inside of their bodies using endocytosis to kill them. Exocytosis would be like when a nerve cell secretes neurotransmitters to send a signal throughout the body. Those neurotransmitters are created by cells, and we have to pump them out into the system so that they can move around and communicate with other cells, and that is called exocytosis. So, stuff exiting, exocytosis, stuff entering, endocytosis. Endocytosis, or this entering process, is fascinating. It has special names for two different types of this engulfing. We call it phagocytosis if the cell is eating. That's like when it's eating solids and it brings them in and digests them. Pinocytosis is the cells drinking, or it's engulfing liquids. These are usually smaller parts, and there's a lot of them. And so all of these tiny parts will be engulfed into one vesicle, I might add, which is why they call it drinking. Where phagocytosis usually involves a much larger particle, hence the word engulfing and eating. Let's see if you can fill in the summary chart of what you have learned in your note packet.